They arrive at the cabin, surrounded by dense, quiet woods. Oliver's eyes scan the tree line, his gaze sharp, cautious, and uneasy. His brows knit together, his lips pressed into a thin, tense line as unease creeps in. "This place feels off," Oliver says, his eyes narrowing with suspicion, his voice low and wary. "Relax," Ellie replies with a soft smile, her tone light, dismissive, and playful. "It's just us." As they walk to the cabin, the sound of branches creaking echoes behind them. Oliver's head jerks back, eyes darting, his breath quick and shallow, his jaw tight with silent dread. He sees nothing but swaying branches. Inside, the cabin is dim, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dampness. Dust particles float lazily in the weak light, creating a hazy glow. Oliver's gaze shifts to the flickering lights, his eyes narrowing in scrutiny, his face twisting with mild frustration. "Power's shaky. I'll check it," he says, his voice firm, but tinged with resignation. He opens the basement door, revealing a narrow, claustrophobic staircase leading down into darkness. Shadows stretch long across the steps. His fingers tighten around the flashlight, his knuckles whitening. His jaw clenches as he takes a slow, hesitant step forward. "Just flip the switch." "Easy," he mutters to himself, his breath shallow, his voice barely above a whisper. Reaching the breaker box, he flips the switch. The lights come on, steady at first, then flicker briefly. His eyes dart to the far corner. For a moment, his breath catches in his throat, his heart thudding like a drum. His gaze sharpens, eyes wide with shock as the beam of his flashlight lands on a figure-shaped shadow. "Ellie?" he says, his voice tight, strained, his throat dry with fear. Silence. The corner is empty now. His chest rises and falls quickly, his eyes darting as his pulse races in his ears. Rain taps against the window in an erratic rhythm. Ellie sits on the couch, her body relaxed, fingers absent-mindedly turning a page of her book. Her eyes are half-lidded with calm focus. Oliver sits by the window, his back straight, his eyes locked on the forest beyond, unblinking, intense, and alert. "Stop staring, there's nothing out there," Ellie says, her tone playful but firm, her gaze not shifting from her book. Thunder rolls, low and rumbling. Oliver's eyes narrow to slits, his head tilting slightly, his face frozen with grim concentration. For a split second, a pale figure moves between the trees. His body goes rigid, breath hitching in his throat, his hands gripping the windowsill. "Ellie, He starts, his voice uneven, shaky, breathless. The lights go out. The room is swallowed by darkness. Rain and wind howl outside. Ellie's breath is sharp, short. She fumbles for her flashlight, clicks it on, sweeping the narrow beam around the room. Her breathing is shallow, eyes darting in quick, sharp movements. "Ollie," she calls out, her voice tight with apprehension. The cabin is still. Shadows stretch long and still in the heavy quiet. It's the middle of the night. Oliver's eyes open slowly, his lashes fluttering as his brow furrows. His breathing is shallow, ears straining. Then, a creak. Slow, deliberate footsteps, heavy and precise. Each step sends a shiver down his spine. His face tenses, lips parted slightly, brows raised, eyes wide with alert terror. "Ellie, you hear that?" he whispers, his voice low, barely a breath, his throat tight with panic. She shifts, but doesn't wake. The footsteps stop. Silence returns, thick and suffocating. Then, from the corner of the room, a breath. Software steady, not his. Morning light filters through the foggy window, pale and cold. Ellie walks to the front door, her eyes narrowing as she sees it. A handprint. Large. Too large. Fingers unnaturally long, stretched like claws. Her brows furrow. Her lips part in silent shock. "Ellie, come look at this," Oliver's voice calls, tense and urgent. Her eyes widen, her pupils shrinking, her breathing shallow. She steps closer, her face twisted in confusion and disbelief. "That's not ours," she says, her voice small, hollow, and laced with fear. Her fingers touch the glass. Her lips tremble as she gasps softly. It's still wet. Evening. Ellie is in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with sharp, precise movements. The thudding of the knife fills the room in a rhythmic beat. Her eyes are distant, her jaw set with focus. Oliver's at the window, his eyes darting to the tree line, his face taut with unease. "Ollie?" Ellie's voice is quiet, shaky, her tone laced with unease. He turns slowly, eyes narrowing, his face stiff with caution. She's staring past him, her eyes wide, brows raised, lips parted as her breath comes in shallow bursts. He follows her gaze, a face pressed against the glass. White skin, too pale. Hollow, empty eyes. A grin stretched unnaturally wide. Its head tilts slowly in a deliberate, unsettling arc. "Don't move," Oliver says, his voice trembling, his body frozen with dread. The face stays for one long, unbearable second. Then, with a loud bang, it's gone. Rain pours as Oliver drives fast down the narrow road. His hands grip the wheel, knuckles white with tension. Ellie sits beside him, her chest heaving with sharp, fast breaths, her eyes wide with panic. She presses a cloth to her arm, blood soaking through. "Just drive. Don't stop," she yells, her voice sharp and cracking with fear. A loud thump. Something lands on the roof. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate knocks on the metal. Her breath becomes frantic, sharp gasps mixed with low whimpers. "It's on the roof! It's on the roof!" Ellie's voice is high, desperate, breathless. Oliver's jaw tightens. His eyes flick to the rearview mirror, wide with terror, his breath shallow and fast. The taps stop. A slow, dragging scrape runs along the roof. The sound pierces the silence, metal on metal, slow and deliberate. Then, a breath fogs the inside of the rear window. It's on the inside. Two hollow eyes stare back at them from the back seat, unblinking, wide and empty. "Wrong turn," says a low, guttural voice.